funded by the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland with the television licence fee.
You're listening to Programme 3 of Wanting to Help Others, the three-part series which investigates the stories of various Irish men and women who volunteered their time, skills and services overseas to help empower people and communities in other lands. In 1981, Terry Cunningham and his wife Jennifer went to Tanzania to do volunteer work there with the humanitarian and development agency Concern. So what exactly did their work entail? Terry Cunningham.
Jennifer, she was a secondary teacher here, so she actually went teaching English. And I went out then to replace someone who had started, a forestry project out in the southern highlands of Tanzania. It's 500 miles actually from the coast down towards Lake Malawi, but it's actually at 6,000 feet, with the result that the weather is incredible good climate, right? It's incredible climate actually because it's cool. It's just south of the equator, but naturally enough, people there need fuel for the fires because actually you used to freeze sometimes at night in the winter. So the job was really to grow firewood basically. Also, obviously, some building wood, and naturally enough, people in the villages, they cut the nearest tree first, naturally, you know what I mean?
And Terry Cunningham also had this to say about his forestry work in Tanzania during the early 1980s.
It was all little nurseries, about 10 of them, and where you produce little trees, real simple, thousands upon tens upon thousands, and then get them out to the villages. And this was all done in conjunction with the local forestry department, you know, who really basically had nothing, you know what I mean? They really, equipment, they didn't, you know, they had no transport, they didn't know nothing really. And so you try to give help, but then what you try to do, obviously, to give help that some way can be continued. That's the problem with obviously a lot of AIDS, you know, be aware of that. If there's a missing link, I mean, if you have 100,000 saplings of trees and you've no way, literally, physically, no way of getting them, we'll say 30 miles to, well, sure, what's the point of growing the 100,000 trees? You know what I mean? If part of the jigsaw is missing, and that's a huge problem of that, the missing links, you know what I mean? So one has to really watch out. So the simpler the system is, the better, and the more local material that's used, the better. It means that it can continue. So that was the project.
So just how did the forestry work which Terry was involved in fare?
I was lucky for a start. We were in a stable situation. I was there, that there was a government, there was a stable government, there was a stable environment. It was poor, but it was stable. So the projects that we were on held, and I did see pictures since, and I did see reports. The forests grew, and they were minded, and it worked. That was mostly, as I said, due to the Tanzania system of control and government, and, you know, good people minding the place. So at that very simple level, it was a real simple project. You got little seeds, you grew trees, you planted trees in a place where there was an arrangement, a local political arrangement, for a better word, that ensured it. So yeah, that's simple, isn't it? You know, so
the community's gained.
Yeah, so the community gained, and it worked because it was simple. And trees grow. So even if the project of growing more trees, if that didn't continue, and it does, obviously, it does. Maybe not necessarily exactly all your little gardens, but obviously they're growing trees in Africa. But the trees you planted, if you planted 1 million of them, well, they grew. You know what I mean? So that, I suppose, is small, but it's still very worthwhile. You know what I mean? And when we were there, I did work hard, and everyone did.
And key to the success of such work was working in conjunction with the local district forestry department, Terry Cunningham.
We did work completely through the local offices. In other words, the boss, in fact, in my case, would be the regional forester. I'd be with the local district forestry. You know what I mean? And to be if he said something couldn't happen, then I wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? I was enabling him to do his job.
During his 3 years in total in Tanzania, aside from his forestry development work, Terry Cunningham was also involved in a horticulture development project.
We were asked to begin a horticultural project. Now, that was a slower burner. You know, there was a learning curve there for everyone to what crops might grow, what seeds, where to get seeds. So when I was there, it was setting up the little nursery, just setting them up, trying to get these seeds, trying to learn, try to train people, including ourselves. But I did see afterwards there was people who went out, and I did see photographs. So concerned it followed, or the projects followed on after me, and it did bloom. And I did see the
mangoes now, and all the different fruits that you were getting the local people to grow.
Local people to grow. And yes, I did. I saw the picture. So it did follow on, and it did work, and it did succeed.
Terry Cunningham and his wife Anne returned to Ireland in 1984, following their 3 years of volunteer work in Tanzania. So what was the best thing for Terry about such volunteering overseas?
The best thing of volunteering overseas was that you can contribute and that you can help. And of course, like everyone says, and it's absolutely true, that you get more from it than you give in a certain way.
And veering away from overseas volunteering work in Africa and letting the spotlight now fall on Europe, for many years, John Pollard from County Tipperary did volunteer work in Belarus with the Eddie Roach charity Chernobyl Children International. So what exactly did John Pollard's work entail?
Most of my work was with the transport. By that I mean we would go to Germany. In the beginning we used to get a lot of vehicles donated from even my employer, such as the ESB at the time. We would convert those into a kind of fairly basic ambulances, and then we'd get a number of volunteers and we'd take them out and they'd be distributed all over Belarus. Then in a couple of years we discovered what we were doing was very, very hard work, and we discovered that in Germany we could pick up end-of-life ambulances. I would say, when I say end-of-life, I don't mean that there were any balls of scrap or anything, but in Germany, it's mostly the Red Cross runs the ambulance service. What they do then is you'd have a frontline ambulance which dealt with all sorts of emergencies. Then that became a second line, which was like for bringing patients to and from clinics and that. And after a number of years, then they were obsoleted. And the circle or the cycle kept going in such a way. So then we used to buy them from a man called Hans Mantler. And what Hans used to do was buy the vehicles from the Red Cross, and he would export them all over the world. Now, this guy was in a place called Michendorf, and we'd maybe at Friday evening with 2 or 3 of us would fly out, or maybe 5 of us, examine the vehicles on Saturday, pay them for them, and we would bring those back to Ireland. What would happen then, we'd hold a function, could be held in Dublin or Middleton or somewhere, and all the organisations from all over the country now, and there was quite a number, would come along. Some of the times the people from the organisations that were fundraising would take the vehicle out for us. More times they maybe nominate something, then some of us people, the mechanics, would take 1 or 2 ourselves out in case of breakdowns on the way. And what had happened then, we'd head out, we'd compound them, as it is known as. There would be people then from the local, I suppose the county council, we'll call them for want of a better word, the Department of Transport, to come inspect them, that they were what they were. And then the people from the orphanages these were donated to would come and collect the ambulances from us. Then they would be used for basically bringing children to hospitals, older people from villages. Like, we kind of set up an ambulance service for them. And that went on for a long number of years now.
And just as a matter of interest, you're talking about, like, in a matter of a minute or two, you know, talking about bringing them out, but there's challenges involved. You know, I mean, you're there, you're driving the ambulance out, you know, from Ireland out to Belarus, you know, which is a good distance away. What were the challenges now, that, you know, on a normal, if there was such a thing as a normal trip, you know, and getting it out and everything?
Biggest challenge was, and I suppose I was blessed that I did a lot of continental driving, people who never literally left Ireland were all of a sudden were in this, suppose, a commercial vehicle, to want a better word, and we found it very hard to hold them in convoy. That was one of our biggest problems. Most of our convoys would motor along, we'd pull up, we had designated stops, and we had breakdowns. Believe it or believe it not, we would have the vehicles checked here in Ireland, but maybe a water pump could go on a vehicle, an injector pump or something. Well, that was up to us then. We had to get the vehicles repaired and get on with it from there. Like, there was many's the night the mechanics worked all night to get a vehicle up and running for the morning. And then what we found was that the biggest challenge we found, and this was in the earlier days when you had Poland as a non-EU country, was being stopped on the German-Polish border. Very, very slow. Now, it was nothing to do with the organisation. It was to do with the amount of vehicles. We could rank up on maybe 15 ambulances, plus a convoy of trucks with aid going through at the one time. So that all took time. Then with the integration of Poland into the EU.
In the early 90s.
In the yes, which was one of the brilliant things, because literally once we left Calais, we had a straight run till we got to the Polish-Belarusian border. Now, that was itself was a challenge back then, because the border posts were small, the staff were low on staff, and like you had 20 or 30 vehicles coming in. Now, and it wasn't the coming in and the going out, it was the vehicles that were remaining. They were the ones that had to be a kind of, like, very seldom to what we have in Ireland, customs cleared. So that did take time, and an awful lot of our volunteers couldn't see where this time was. They thought like it was like driving down to the shop, you buy your stuff and you go away. No, they couldn't understand it could take 2 days, 3 days to clear customs. And there was no such thing as saying, well, this 10 of them clear, 10 of you go away. No, we all travelled in convoy. You know, that was more or less the biggest challenges we've had.
And I'd say when you got out there and you saw on the ground, you know, the ambulance, you were able to hand it over, or whatever the vehicle was, to help the people out there, I'd say kind of soul nourishing. Would I be right, John? You know, you kind of felt, well, look, I'm doing something here that's having a positive impact.
Unbelievable. We would normally, in all these orphanages, hospitals, health centres, there was a director. He was the person in charge of the whole operation of the health system within that place, and to see the look on their faces that they were physically get this piece of equipment which was going to really make their life much, much better.
Yeah, because at that time, you know, I mean, the fallout had just happened a few years previously, so tough situation, you know, and any bit of aid, you know, I mean, will help the situation at that critical moment.
That would be correct. That aid in one thing, and then what we also did for these people was there was a program set up by some organisation, I'm not 100% sure of it, in America, which donated a certain level of funds for the maintenance of these vehicles. So this director and his driver didn't have to find money every year to maintain the vehicle, because when myself and one or two other mechanics would go there, we would then do a tour. That's why it's taken so long. We would do a tour maybe in March, April. We'd then see what state the ambulance was in, what was wearing out, and what did he need. And we'd go back then maybe, hopefully August, early September, buy a lot of stuff in the likes of big open-air markets. When you take it, there was markets outside nearly every city. You could buy anything from tyres to motor components, and we then donate them to that particular orphanage. So that meant that he had a very good piece of kit which he didn't have another headache of maintaining.
Right, yeah. So you had the vehicle and you had all the backup essentials, that you're going to wear and tear and tyres and so on, that you're going to have to replace down the line no matter what.
Yeah, because even we initially set it up, we said, we'll service these vehicles. But we found that the mechanical technology out there, their own mechanics in Belarus, they were fabulous. Because they were sort of people who could make something adapt. They could turn around a bad situation, and they'd go maybe to an iron foundry, maybe to a machine shop and make a part. Their act of being able to keep a vehicle on the road is fabulous.
John, how many trips in total did you make for Chernobyl Children International?
Well, I suppose 15 for Chernobyl Children International I would have made. That had been delivered in vehicles, doing maintenance there and all that kind of work, and looking after the spare parts program that they run. But if you say, what did we get out of the program? A hell of a lot. And who really benefited from the whole thing was the people and the children. We always said that as volunteers, we're doing it for the children.
And veering away from volunteering work in Eastern Europe and turning our attention once again to Africa, Regina Flynn, originally from County Roscommon, spent 3 years from 1979 to 1982 doing volunteer teaching work in Zambia.
I was 25 years of age when I went to Zambia. It was 1979, and at that time I was teaching in Navan Tech, but there was no leave of absence and there was no career break at the time, so I resigned from my first permanent pensionable job and I went to Zambia for 3 years to teach in an American Marianist mission school in Lusaka, Zambia.
What was it like?
It was fantastic, really. At the time, there was no pre-departure training, so I went out all I knew about the school was what the principal wrote to me, because that's how I got the job. I didn't go with any organisation. I went directly to the school. The first 2 weeks were a little bit strange because the sounds in the grass every night, and it got dark at 6 o'clock every evening, were very strange, but they were frogs and cicadas, jumping around in the garden outside. It was just amazing. I settled in really, really quickly, and I absolutely loved it from the very beginning.
And Regina also had this to say about the Zambian school which she spent 3 years teaching in.
It was a secondary school, a boys' secondary school in Metero compound, just about 4 kilometres from Lusaka city centre. And it was, as I said, a Marianist school. And the classes were 42 boys. My classes were 42 boys in each class. Some of them were even a bit older than me. I was 25, but some of them were a bit older than me. And obviously some of them were younger than me. But I taught English from Form 1. I brought the same classes up to their exam, their state exam in Form 3.
Right, and what was it like teaching English in Zambia? You're coming from Ireland, a very different country, and all of a sudden now you're in Zambia, you're there for 3 years teaching English. What was it like, Regina? What were the challenges?
I think the challenges were, there was a lack of resources to teach English in the school, and we formed English teachers in Lusaka. We formed this English Teachers Association of Zambia, and we got together every month and we devised material and resources for our classes. The method of teaching was chalk and talk. We absolutely had nothing else. There was no handouts, there was no textbooks, there was no resources or overhead projectors or anything like that schools have now. So it was challenging. But I must say the 42 boys in each class were perfect students. They came in every day, spick and span, even though they came from the compound, which didn't have running water. It might have had tap, for 10,000 people somewhere in the compound. They were very proud of their school uniform, and they came in every day, and we did lots of extracurricular activities in the school. I was in charge of the library and the school magazine.
So what exactly did a typical teaching day for Regina Flynn entail?
At 7:45, the whole school and staff gathered for assembly outside in the courtyard. There was a beautiful courtyard in the school. That finished at 8 o'clock, and then in the morning, and then our classes were about 40 minutes long, but we often had double classes of English because, English, maths and science, I think it was, were important subjects in the curriculum at the time. And so we went on until lunchtime. Lunchtime was quite a long period. It was an hour and 3/4 or an hour and a half, I think, because it was quite hot. So we took, and then there were afternoon classes in the afternoon. And then production work began. And that was part of the Ministry of Education curricula for education. Everybody had to take part, staff and students, in what they called production work. And that involved, orchard work, growing trees and lemons and bananas and all of that sort of thing. It could involve making jam. It was weeding and, gardening work and, taking care of the fruit trees, etc. And for me, it was, I think we started we'd have a half an hour break after school, and then it'd be 2 hours. We'd finish at 6:30 in the evening. And, I did the magazine and the library. But that was part of my production work, you see. And so then 6:30 to 7:30, I'd take a break, and then it was correction of copies and homework, and then I'd have to prepare for the next day, and I was in bed every night at 10 o'clock.
I'd say sleep wasn't an issue.
No, not at all. I slept soundly, yeah.
And Regina Flynn also had this story to share concerning some of the cultural differences that she encountered in her teaching work with Zambian students.
The boys were funny, they kind of commented a little bit. They couldn't get over that I was single and that I had no baby. I had no children. They could not get over that.
Really?
They couldn't understand it. They couldn't accept it. And so they all thought that I was hiding some babies or some husband somewhere. So that was very funny to explain to them in Irish society. We were quite common. It was quite common for women to be single at 25.
And I also asked Regina what she enjoyed most about her teaching work in Zambia.
I suppose I was fully engaged in school life. The teachers, we all had houses on the school compound. And so there was great interaction between Asian teachers, Canadian, Zambian, Irish. We all visited each other, and, we got on very well. So that was really good. And I think it was such a healthy lifestyle, because I was in bed early to get up early, to work a very long day. And of course, in Zambia, you have the most amazing fruits and vegetables like avocado and, papaya, etc. So that was brilliant. Now, I have to say, in my time in Zambia, it was a difficult time politically because the war in Zimbabwe was going on. And Joshua Nkomo, one of the freedom fighters, if you like, one of those leaders, his camp was only 4 kilometres down the road from my school. So we were sometimes under curfew, and most nights we would hear gunfire. So it was quite difficult at times.
Was your life ever in danger?
No, because actually our school was on the edge of the police compound, so we were fine. We were quite safe. But it was a tense time because the Rhodesian forces came in to Lusaka at the time, until 1980, when Zimbabwe got independence and they bombed, the bridges and the infrastructure in Lusaka and surrounding areas. So, it wasn't easy.
Regina Flynn spent 3 years in total from 1979 to 1982 doing volunteer teaching work in Zambia. So what big lessons, if any, did she take away from her time there?
I think when I went to Zambia, I knew about poverty. I thought I knew about poverty. I knew about injustice. I thought I knew about injustice. But when I was there on the ground for those 3 years, it conscientized me. It politically educated me, because I saw the poverty and the injustices and the role of women, was so difficult and so complex. And I learnt that poverty, injustices and all of that are structural. They're in the structures, they're in the political systems, economic systems, etc. And in that sense, that was a very good education for me, because when I returned to Ireland, I became very active in different justice and peace organisations and solidarity organisations.
Over the last 3 programmes in this Wanting to Help Others series, we've heard 9 Irish people discuss their volunteer work overseas. Whether it be volunteering to help improve education in Zimbabwe or Cambodia, or provide famine relief in Somalia, or other similar scenarios. More than anything else, such volunteerism overseas embodies the noble ideal that it's good and worthwhile to dedicate oneself to helping others. In this vein, I'm going to leave the last word with various contributors talking about some of the benefits of volunteering overseas.
Most people who volunteer overseas, like myself, we learn more than we give.
We came out of it, I think, as human beings, better, more rounded, having a greater sense of social justice.
It's a great education and a leveller of life.
Without a shadow of a doubt, I have learned far more than I have ever taught.
I learned a huge amount.
You learn so much about life and you appreciate so much more.
Funded by the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland with the television licence fee.